Welcome today. It's Jen from Spark Joy Ministries. I'm so glad to have you with us, listening, watching, all of that stuff. I have a special guest, Tarinna. Is that how you pronounce it? I'm
Tarinna,
terrible with
yes.
names.
That's okay. It's
Okay,
Tarinna.
yes. Okay, so I am so grateful that she decided to say yes. And I think the thing that I'm most impressed with her about is she's gone through, I mean, 2020 was rough for a lot of people, but um, I've seen how she's grieved her mom's death, as well as, her child. And so even though we're not here to talk about mom, I just have seen that. And I know you're a very creative person from what I
Hmm.
can see. You
Yes.
really love music,
Hmm.
you're
Hmm.
author, you're a speaker. I'm just like, whoa, like I'm sure what is more your passion, unless all of it is. But why don't you introduce yourself and just let us know just something about you so that we can understand you better.
Thank you so much for having me today, Jennifer. People do not have to ask you to speak at all, so I don't take any opportunity for granted. So thank you so much for that. And I am Tarinna Olley. I'm based in the East Coast in the Washington, D.C. area. And as you mentioned, all those things, being a creative and a counselor, which are very true. I love creating. Creating gives me an opportunity to um, like spread my mind to just thinking it in so many different ways. And I know it's a gift from God. Like I give it all to him, that he gives me the creative ideas. Speaking came sort of kind of by accident. It's not my preference, but I do it. Um, but it my speaking came from me creating. I'm an avid writer and I write poetry, and so speaking actually came out of that. The poems that I wrote would resonate with people, and then people started asking me to come talk about them, and I was like, "Who, me? You want me to talk about them?" Like, Lord, that's not what I had planned. I just wanted to write the nice poems and kind of leave it at that. But when you yield to the Father, that's what it's about. We're messengers for Him, but I believe so. I just believe I'm just a messenger for Christ.
I love that.
Hmm.
We are definitely supposed to be his hands and feet, and I
Hmm.
see that through your posts, and I appreciate that about you. I actually met you in a different group
Yes. Hmm.
that is more geared towards Black women. Obviously, I'm
Hmm.
not, but I'm privileged to be in the group, and I don't know,
Hmm.
sent them a message, and then it's
Yes.
right.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
why don't you go ahead and just tell us your journey into motherhood,
Hmm.
and then what happened with your child?
So I love being a mom. Like I am that mom. Pick up, drop off. I love, love, love being a mom. I have two sons. My oldest is 18 and my youngest is 12. And I have a bonus son who's 9. And my angel Gabriel is the one who I lost in October of 2016. And I was 40 at the time, and wasn't planning on, you know, having any more kids, so to speak. But things happen, and God saw fit. That's what I say. And so I always wanted a daughter, so I was hopeful that he would be a boy. But I really enjoy the just like I said, being a mom. I'm that mom that's super active in that kids' lives. Probably too much for my 18-year-old, but so that's, yes, I really, really enjoy being a mom.
Yeah. No, that's it's beautiful that you can, talk about and appreciate all of your children.
Hmm.
What happened with Gabriel? How far along were you? Did you know something
Hmm.
was wrong?
So I didn't. So I actually have seasonal allergies, and so around the springtime is just in the DC area, the pollen is just way bad, and so normally I have to go in to the doctor's office for some type of nasal something because over the counter just doesn't work anymore for me. And so I went in, for the routine nasal things, and so my doctor knows me. I'm a regular, and so she said, "Well, what I want to give you this time," she said, "you can't take it if you're expecting." And so she said, "I'll have to give you a pregnancy test. So I said, okay. And so I had, if anyone who has like severe allergies, you can get all the feels like the headaches, even some of the nausea from the, nasal drip and all those things. So I just didn't think of anything because I didn't miss a cycle or anything. And so she came back into the room and she looked like she saw a ghost to me. She said, were you trying to get pregnant? I'm like, well, not really. And so she was like, well, normally your age is kind of hard because I was 40 at the time. And I said, well, no, and speeding up the story. And so she's like, well, you're 9 weeks. I said, whoa. I said, okay. And so I called my husband and told him. And so everything was fine. I went to the OB as normal, went to the same OB that I delivered my second son. I hadn't had any complications at all with my first two kids. So none of that. And so speeding up the story, probably around the 5 month, around the 5 month mark, I went to do, because at that age of 40, they do so many additional testing. So I got the genetic testing done. And so it didn't come back for like spina bifida or Down syndrome. So then that was clear. And so, but then they said, well, we see a little something, so let's get, another testing done. So I was like, okay, I didn't really think too much of it. And so during the sonograms, they were saying, well, the baby seems to be a little larger than normal, but they weren't too alarmed by that because that can tend to happen. And so as time went on, um, the initial genetic testing that I had, they kept saying it was inconclusive. And I'm like, well, I'm not familiar with any of this. I'm like, okay, so how was it inconclusive? Like you took all my blood. So I don't understand what you're not seeing. And so then they came back and they saying we were seeing some abnormalities or what have you. And so just tons of tests and seeing tons and tons of specialists. I had to get an amniocentesis. I had never had that before. And that's when they really got more information. And probably around month 6, they had said that his name was Gabriel. He had trisomy 13. And I had never heard of anything of such. And I work in a field where, I've heard of varying disabilities, but that particular one I had not. And so as much as you can Google things, I Googled and I saw the severity of, trisomy 13. I was like, oh, that seems like really a lot. Said he could be blind, cleft palate, club feet, just like all the things. But then, of course, they said there's those occasions where he may not have those things. And so the doctors honestly weren't confident. They said from their experience with a child with trisomy 13 that I would go to full term. And then the doctor came and said, well, because of that, we can ethically go to the board and have you abort if you want to. And I was like, no, that's just not, my belief or my and I said, well, I'll trust God. That was my honest thing. And when talking to so many doctors and seeing so many specialists, it was just so daunting. And so I literally had said, my church members were praying, everybody was praying. And I said, well, I'm not going to abort him at all. I said, if he is born with medical issues, then we'll deal with it. However, if God allows him to be here, we will raise him. He's my son. I'm not going to put him in a home. None of those things, like none of those things ever crossed my mind. It's just, okay, for whatever reason things happen and we'll raise him to the best of our abilities. And so I stayed pregnant for like another month, and then they eventually sent us to another specialist. And then this is when they came back in, and I didn't know it was we had the heart specialist. And so with him, one of his valves or ventricles where it was supposed to be connected in the inside, his was on the outside. And they were saying with that, it was not something that even if he was born to term, that there was not a surgery that could repair that. And so hearing that, I said, well, I'm still going to trust God because God is miraculous. He can do all kinds of things. And so I left it honestly in the Lord's hands. And so um, I was, and then being very honest, I was on my way. I was engaged at the time. And like I said, I had dealt with a lot of guilt. I'm being very honest. And I said, well, Lord, is this some punishment because I'm pregnant now and I'm not married? And I said, Lord, I disobeyed and I, talked to my pastor and everything. And he was like, I know you've beaten yourself already up. I'm not going to come and beat you up any further. And because I was just like, oh my gosh, so I went through that piece of the layer. Then I was like, well, no, I don't know God to be that kind of God who's going to, kill me or want some harm to me because of a choice that I made. And so went to the heart specialist, and then they had top of the line everything. And I was really grateful about that I had the insurance and the finances, to get the care that I needed. And they had about 2 or 3 nurses come in and a social worker. And for me being a counselor, I was familiar with so many things. And so when I saw that number of people coming in the room, I was like, okay, it's not probably a good, even further prognosis. And so at that time, they pretty much said, it's like any day your baby is probably going to pass. And I can't even explain the word. And the doctor, he kept saying to me, he was like, you're very stoic. And I said, I'm processing it all. I was like, I don't have an answer right now. And then they're giving us books to prepare for funerals and all those things. I'm like, the baby, he's not dead. Like, why are you giving me books on death and dying? But I do understand it from a professional side, why, they want parents to be prepared and all those kinds of things. And so I still said, well, God, I'll trust you. And that was my honest assessment at that time. And I said, well, continue to trust God. So I had gotten married. And at that point, around 7 months, most moms know, my baby is extremely active. And so he was still extremely active, still kicking the whole nine. And so I said, well, okay, the weight gain is normal. Everything was normal except the heart issue or what have you. And I said, well, God, everything else is still normal. I'm measuring the same as I'm supposed to. So I said, something is happening still according to plan. And so, like on my honeymoon, I kind of, and most moms the baby, and if it's not, and I said, it didn't seem like he was kicking as much. I attributed to maybe, he was asleep or laying a certain way or whatever. I said, but at some point, the activity comes again at that point. And I said, no, it's not. And so I called the doctor. So he was like, well, come in. It was probably that weekend. And he said, come in that Monday. And so then I went, and they went to do the sonogram and things. And so the guy who's doing the sonogram, like, we know what the heartbeat sounds like, when you've had sonograms and you hear the two. And I knew at that instance I was like, that's my heartbeat. That's not the baby's heartbeat. Like, I clearly knew the distinction. But the doctor who's doing the sonogram, he never said anything. He was just quiet. And I think for me also working in the field, I know what that looks like, and being in hospitals where it's something wrong, but they're not saying it, right?
Mhm.
So he brought in the my OB, and he said, I'm so sorry. He was like, he's gone. And my husband and I, they gave us time, just to ourselves and stuff. And that was extremely hard. And just having to go home knowing that he had already passed. And so I'm 7 months. My stomach is way out there. And just to have to spend like several more hours, going home, preparing the bag and all that stuff to go, because then they asked me, did I want to do a vaginal delivery or C-section? And at that point for me, he says, he didn't tell me either way to do. He says, but to vaginal, they would have to induce, and then I would still have to push. And do all of that like a normal labor. And I was like, I really didn't want to do that. And so he said, well, you can have a C-section. So I opted to do the C-section because he had already passed. And I knew I just couldn't fathom going through the whole inducing labor and he was already gone. And so,
Well, and
um,
it's like you have a dead body inside,
mhm,
even though it's your baby.
yes,
And I mean, I remember
yes,
thinking, "Oh gosh, let's get the baby out." But
yeah,
you
mhm,
you have to make that decision. Are you going to go
mhm,
through the delivery?
mhm,
Or are you going to do the C-section?
mhm,
So
mhm.
it's good that you're able to make that choice.
Yeah, yeah. And we did that and you've experienced and went down it. I don't wish that on my worst enemy, anybody. It's a undescribable kind of pain and just loss. And so I had great family support. The room was filled full of people. The time I was supposed to have the C-section, it had gotten delayed because mine they didn't consider quote unquote emergency, and so I was getting bumped in the surgery thing or what have you, and so I had to wind up waiting even longer. I probably got there about it wasn't even dark yet, so maybe like 5 or 6 o'clock, and I didn't deliver he until like 3 o'clock that morning,
Mm,
and I believe just me. I don't know if I was still trying to pull something to still see God even in the midst of tragedy. And I said, okay, well, I carry him full term 7 months. I said the number seven means completion. And I said, maybe God, this was the lot that you had for me for whatever reason. And then him being born in the at the 3 a.m. hour. And I said three means Trinity. Like all those things I pulled from to say, I said, well, the Holy Spirit means Trinity. And I said, because I was scheduled to go at another time. I said, but it happened at the 3 a.m. hour. And so, but I could not hold him. Yeah. hmm Yeah. So, I couldn't hold him though when he was delivered. I couldn't pull myself together to do that. And we had the option, and the nurse was very wonderful in there to say, well, you're not the only mom who has opted not to hold their baby, and we understand why. I just I didn't know if I wanted that visual memory, because I know I could have a picturesque memory kind of thing, and that's a choice that I made. But my husband, he opted to hold Gabriel, and my dad, they both were there. And so just saying, my husband kept saying he had this long fingers and his fingernails, and said he looked like, he was normal size, everything. How they had said he would have the cleft lip and all the club feet. He didn't have any of that. He
so
didn't have
it was
any of
just
that.
his heart.
It was just a heart. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So, and that was October 2016. I was supposed to deliver him actually January 3rd, 2017. There you go, three again. Yeah. So so I tried my hardest to find some good in it, but I had to really dig deep, extremely deep,
Yeah.
to find that. Yeah.
What did everyone's grief process obviously is different. We're both
hmm
counselors, we know that.
hmm
And then when you're on this side of the fence where you're just like,
hmm
okay, it's not just someone else's grief or story. It's like,
hmm
how do I process this? How do I heal?
hmm hmm
So what helped you heal? It's been 5 years now.
hmm
Came up
hmm
with the university. So what has helped you in your process?
Honestly, Jennifer, I say if I did not have, excuse me, a personal relationship with God, I don't know how I would have gotten through that. Honestly,
Mhm.
I don't. I know people who do it who don't have it, but I know how extremely hard it was for me, and I had a personal relationship with the Lord. But having that anchor already, and that foundation with me has helped me get through that process. And of course, my church family, people were so supportive. My immediate family, everyone was just supportive, and I talked. I forced myself to talk, and I wrote every single day in a journal. And I took 5 months off from work because I just couldn't pull the pieces together. And I know my line of work, and I need to be in full capacity to do my job, and I just knew I wasn't. And so I took the time that I needed, but I wrote every single day. And actually, I didn't set out to write a book, but the book is actually called The Journey. But I didn't set out to write a book. I just needed to get those raw feelings out. And that really helped me a lot to journal every single day. I just wrote down every thought imaginable because I needed a place to get those feelings out.
So what is your book about for those that don't know? Because I know you're an author, but obviously I haven't
Mm-hmm.
read the book. So
Mm-hmm.
what is your book about? What can people expect if they do look for it?
Actually, in the book called Journey, because that was indeed a journey going through all of that, especially just compounded with the medical issues and just seeing all the doctors. And I was like, do I have any ounce of blood left because of all the poking? And I'm like, oh my goodness. But it was indeed a journey, but I believe seeing it on this side now, I know God walked with me through the journey because I kept my mind, even though it was extremely hard. He gave me levels of peace. Did I cry? Absolutely, yes. Was it extremely hard? Of course, all those things. So I'm not minimizing that. But the book was about the journey, the things that I heard from the doctor, all about being offered the option of having an abortion, where I was adamant saying absolutely not. That was just not something I would do. So it chronicles that. It chronicles the journey of love, of going through something like that with the spouse. I couldn't imagine, attempting to go through something like that without a spouse, you
Mhm.
know, because it's challenging. And so the book is about, and then ultimately the love of God, how God, through every single thing, even though you may not feel like it. And then for some part of it, the book talks about, I felt like God was distant. I really could not understand, well, why even allow me to get pregnant just for the baby to pass? So all the book really talks about that, but it is a book to encourage you, and it has a place of poems in the end. It has some poems in it, and it has a writing section in the book, because I think that's helpful for moms to have a place, because some moms may not want to talk, and that's okay. But some
Mhm.
moms may feel more comfortable just writing some little notes to themselves. So the book actually has a section in the back where they can just jot down some thoughts that they had about the book or their feelings. And if they never wanted to share them with anybody, they didn't have to. But I knew that moms need an outlet of some sorts. And I thought writing was a good way. So I included that in the book.
That's beautiful. I'm glad that
Hmm.
God has,
Hmm.
brought you from like having this passion for writing. And
Hmm.
then, it's exciting to have your own book. I have an ebook
Hmm.
coming out. I feel like it's
Hmm.
like that next step, but um,
Hmm.
it's exciting that God is taking our pain and allowing us to reach other people.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
during the time that you experience it, it's definitely not exciting. It's the most excruciating thing that you can ever
Yes.
experience. And in some ways, you
Hmm.
kind of feel like, how am I going to pull out of this?
Yes.
What I
Hmm.
talk about in my book, like, you know, how am I going to talk to my coworkers? How am I going to
Hmm.
face people? How am I going to have
Yes.
some normalcy back in my life? And
Yes.
it's possible. It's possible.
Hmm.
Jesus
Hmm.
was able to meet me, and it sounds like you, in
Hmm.
a way
Hmm.
that you don't understand that peace, but
Hmm.
yet he gives you peace even if you can't pray. And
Yes. Yes.
it's something beautiful that God wants to provide for everyone who
Hmm.
experiences loss. But
Hmm.
it's confusing. Why does he allow certain things to happen when
Hmm.
it wouldn't have it been easier just to not go through
Yes. Yes. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, I've had all those thoughts. And um I went to therapy. I had to get definitely some counsel with that, because it was hard. The grief was just heavy. And so that helped me as well. Because on some regards, like you said, being in the church and you don't have all the full answers, and just even being reared a certain way. Even sometimes with me growing up in the faith, where it's like, do you question God? You don't, I don't want to be disrespectful to God. So just kind of trying to muster my way through all of that, talking to my pastor about it. But even the work piece, that's something the therapist had to help me through that process, because I was attempting to change units because I did not want to go back to see those same coworkers where everybody knew, but
Mhm.
I just didn't want to have the conversation. Like, I just wasn't ready at that point. And um, just having to work through that piece, because that is one of the areas that for me, I know I have to work on. I can be avoidant. Like, if I can avoid it, then, but some things you just have to face on. But my supervisor was extremely um, supportive, and she let the staff know
Mhm.
Tarinna's not in a place yet to talk about it. If she brings it up to you, then that's fine. And so that really worked for me. One of the co-workers did not get the message. And so she came, she said, "Oh, so how's the baby doing now?" And I was like, and I was like, the baby didn't make it. So, but by that point I had worked up,
Mhm.
the verbiage in the catalog to be able to speak at that point. But I got through it. I still have moments. I do. I still have moments, and I think you will just have them.
Yeah.
But I know without a shadow of a doubt, without my faith and belief in God,
Mhm.
I can't, I wouldn't, I don't know how I would have gotten it through him. I'm grateful that he was there with me in the toughest, what I say, some of the toughest moments of my life. I'm
Absolutely.
so grateful about that.
I can kind of relate to how you were talking about like not wanting to sort of face your coworkers
Mm-hmm.
and just avoiding it. I work on crisis mobile teams part time, so
Wow.
not all the coworkers got the memo, and
Uh-huh.
so
Mm-hmm.
I found myself kind of repeating and almost saying things like, "It's okay, I'll see him in heaven." Like, not that I didn't, I believe
Yes.
that, but almost like to help people because
Mm-hmm.
they're silent, they don't know what to say,
Yes, what to say.
and all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden you say, "Well, my baby died and my baby's alive in heaven," then it's
Mm-hmm.
just like, okay, moving on in the conversation because it's
Mm-hmm.
so uncomfortable. And I felt like I had
Mm-hmm.
to kind of almost make them feel better, which we all know
Mm-hmm.
that's not true, but
That's true. Yes. Yeah.
it can be hard. It can be hard when
Yes.
you deal with
Mm-hmm.
those relationships. So I can relate to that part of it. But I'm glad you had a supportive supervisor because
Mm-hmm.
that's what moms need to feel like they can do is say, look,
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about it. So people just
Mm-hmm.
need to just leave it to be right now and I'll talk about
Mm-hmm.
it when I'm ready.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that is like, I know some moms who, actually one of my coworkers who went through the same thing. She sat 2 seats down from me, probably maybe 2 years after my loss, and that was such a huge trigger for me.
Oh,
And the supervisor coming us to, the tears just immediately, and I took the, and everybody understood why, because it was just that close, and I felt like I was reliving it all over again. But every mom doesn't have that. Some moms have to go right back to work, because they don't have the leave or can't afford to have the time off.
right.
And because I was married and had two incomes, and I had, leave, and I got leave donations. And so I was able, but everybody I know don't have that time to spend those amount of months off from work just to gather yourself. And so I'm grateful, even with God. The lady in human resources, she said to me, she said, "I have never seen anyone get this amount of leave donations." She said, "It must be attest to your character that people want to give." And I was able, like I said, to stay off for 5 whole months, because people gave above and beyond. Yeah.
That's really the thing that helps
Yeah.
through grief and loss is whatever
Hmm.
people give if they might think it's nothing, but a
Mm-hmm.
bill and a card and
Mm-hmm.
gift
Mm-hmm.
card and all these little things are just so
Mm-hmm.
meaningful. I actually wish that laws could be changed. It kind of upsets me that, like, especially in our situation, we went through stillbirth, and I understand they can't do this for maybe early pregnancy
Mm-hmm.
preparing,
Mm-hmm.
but like, why can't you get the full, like, here I was preparing for maternity leave,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then I have to call my supervisor when my baby
Mm-hmm.
died, and she's like, take your time. So then I took a month off. But
Mm-hmm.
even so, like, I would have loved to have,
Mm-hmm.
more time. And there's a lot of
Yeah.
women who would love to have 2, 3 weeks off or
Yeah. Yeah.
2 months off or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. So I
Mm-hmm.
just think people, like, the laws need to be changed to recognize that you still gave birth to a baby.
Absolutely. I saw a post someone had posted about that the fight they were going through with their HR, and my heart just immediately, I was like, it's already, you're dealing with your grief, then you have to deal with the bureaucracy of it.
Yeah, like trying to prove,
Request.
like, oh, my baby's worth it. Like,
Yeah.
you need my time.
Yeah, yeah. And so, but I'm so grateful that that period I had to be able to take care of that. Even though I still, had sons, still had to take care of and all those things, I couldn't just totally, check out, because you still have to be present, and trying to maneuver through that piece was sometimes challenging.
Yeah.
But they were understanding, and I'm grateful for that piece of the puzzle with the kids. And we opted not to have a burial.
Okay.
I just couldn't fathom sitting and going through the whole thing. And so the hospital where I was at was a Christian hospital, and so they had special things set up. They had grief counseling on site, and then they had burials for families who opted not to go, whereas like through an endowment or something like that they will go. And he's buried, it's a little ways from me, but it is at a grave in a cemetery, and then they have a plot and stuff. So if I ever wanted to go visit, I went once, several years later down there. So if I decided to go down, a place you can sit and stuff like that, but I didn't want to go the traditional
Yeah.
route of burial. I just couldn't stomach that. Just for me, I couldn't.
Yeah, I understand. I end up doing the ashes, which I was kind of surprised
Hmm.
about that, but financially,
Hmm.
it just didn't make sense for us to
Exactly. Yeah.
pay five
Yeah.
thousand. But
Hmm.
some people, that's meaningful, and
Yeah.
if that's meaningful, then I'm so glad
Hmm.
the people that decide to do that are able to do that, because then you have a place to visit, which is
Hmm.
in itself.
Hmm.
But so how did you have those conversations with your living boys? Because I know that that can be, at least for me, I was like, oh gosh, how do I help my daughter process through losing her brother? And she was younger, mind you, she was 2.5 months, but oh, two
Hmm.
and a half years old. Sorry, 2.5 years old. But how did you help, since your boys were at different ages?
Hmm.
How did you help them with their grief?
Well, my oldest at the time was around, I believe, 14. And then they went through a little piece, even it was just them two for so long. And my boys are 8 years apart. And so then having Gabriel, who passed, then there was a huge, another age gap in between. And so they went through initially, of course, the thought of having someone else come in, another sibling. And so working with them through that, but then through the grief process, which I just had conversations with them about it. My oldest, there was a more of to check on me to make sure that I was okay, because I'm mom, and that's the route that they went. But if I allowed them to check in, and share how they felt, about it, and they definitely remember, him, and use the verbiage and catalog to talk about him. Um, so that's what I did too. I didn't hide it. We had conversations about it when the actual hospital had a memorial service where for other parents, and I thought that was just so special. And so we did go to that, and my family came to that. And they had clergy there, so that was definitely special, with all the parents. So every month they actually had it, and so we went to that.
Do you
And
do you honor him like on a regular basis, like in terms of like maybe an anniversary? Is there anything you do as a family or to honor Gabriel?
I do. So I don't know if you can see here, but I got a tattoo with his name on it, and it's his
Okay,
name with
show it to
angel
me.
wings.
I don't think I
Yeah, yeah. Let me see. Hold on. Let me
is
see
it
if
hard.
I
Is it hard
know.
to show it?
Yeah, no, it's opposite, but it's here.
Oh,
You can't
okay,
see it
okay.
there, but
So it's
it's
still
opposite. Yeah, it's his name,
okay,
and
okay.
just angel wings on the end. So what my therapist had said, definitely on the anniversary of his when he was supposed to be born, actually, to have a plan. And so that tends to have helped me over the years, to the day that he was supposed to be born, and of course the day that he passed. I'm
Yeah,
intentional about planning something for that day.
that's good.
And so one year, because my birthday is 2 days before, with actually 3 days before he passed. And so one year, when my husband gave me a surprise birthday party, which I didn't know he was going to do it, but he did a balloon launch outside, for Gabriel. And so that was definitely special. So we've done that before,
Yeah,
a balloon launch. And sometimes I do the lighting, the candle thing.
the way.
Sometimes, yeah. But because my birthday is so close and my wedding anniversary, so it gives me that kind of buffer, sort of, kind of
Mhm.
like, you don't forget, but I'm kind of like busy and doing stuff, but I'm really intentional still about having a plan for those moments. And triggers still happen. I haven't gotten to the point where, well, I'm not really around babies anyway, because I'm 45, so the majority of my friends have already had kids and things like that. So I'm not really around a lot of babies anyway. But um, I had a little cousin, but I held him once. It still feel kind of odd, um, holding a baby, but I held him once and things. A part of me, honestly, I don't know. For one, age, I say, okay, I'm gonna be 46 years old. So I just think, just naturally as a woman, we go through that anyway. We put this age thing, say, oh, I'm too old or whatever. But on some regard, I don't know. It's like, do I want another child? It's like you never can replace, of course, your child. But um, I don't know. That's something that I think about, but I don't know. I don't hold on it too long, because I do have children, others, sons. But it was always a desire to want a daughter anyway. But yeah. So yeah, but I definitely keep a plan on those days and moments. And when I have triggers, because I still have them, I have a great support system to allow me to just share and talk.
Yeah, that's great because the
Hmm.
triggers do come up. They may not feel as painful as the
Hmm.
beginning, but we're honoring our grief process and realizing that certain things, unexpected things, all of a sudden can trigger you. And some
Hmm.
people are triggered, like maybe they've reached an age where they can't have another baby, or
Hmm.
maybe
Hmm.
they have a medical condition that they
Yeah.
really can't try for other children.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and so, like for me, I mean, being transparent, my husband's been done. He's done with just everything I've been through, having
Yeah.
3 child losses,
Hmm.
and I'm almost 40. So
Hmm.
he recently got the procedure done, and so
Okay.
me, I'm satisfied with whatever, but I'm also grieving because
Mm.
I feel like once you close that chapter, like you're almost saying like I'm not young anymore to do this.
Yes.
And
Yes.
not that I want, it's harder,
Hmm.
honestly, but
Yeah.
there's a part of you that just grieves because God gave us a desire to build children, and
Yes. Yes.
that's okay. Whether it's adoption, whether it's ready
Hmm.
kids have a baby and you have a grandbaby.
Yes.
So
Yes. That
um,
is very
we
true.
have those feelings as women,
Yeah.
come up, and they're different for all of us. So
Very true. And that's a great point, Jennifer, that you made. I think we as women, just naturally, but to honor those feelings, because just being very transparent and honest. Sometimes when, my menstrual cycle comes, there's this two-sided kind of thing of, oh, shoot, it's here.
Yeah.
But then, I'm sorry.
It's
Oh,
okay.
sorry. Yeah. Then it's the side of, oh, that would be, kind of nice if it was like, oh, and then you kind of deal with it. Like if it was that. So I go through those moments, not all the time, but sometimes, of course, I still have those moments. And like you mentioned, um, not wanting to make a final decision to totally close that chapter off.
Mhm.
More so for me, I think about it because with my job, I have 20-year law enforcement and I can retire in 3 years. And so I think about, do I want to start over? Just natural, just stuff. I mean, if anyone got pregnant, you take care of the baby and you do what you have to do. So, but withstanding that, like you said, in the beginning, it was extremely hard, but it's as time goes on, it's not as hard. And I didn't know that in the beginning when people would tell me that, because I just thought like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to stop crying, never going to stop crying.
Exactly. So it's normal, for those that are watching that just are new in the grieving process and
Mm-hmm.
feeling everything's going to trigger you. You're going to cry about
Mm-hmm.
everything. At some point,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to feel like other things take, you know,
Mm-hmm.
importance in your life, but you always have that soft spot for your
Mm-hmm.
child and the grieving
Absolutely.
process and our community. Our
Mm-hmm.
community unfortunately is, in some ways it seems silent, but when we have
Mm-hmm.
these conversations, we are giving a voice to our children and for
Yes.
feelings.
Yes. 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 That is a great point. And I guess for me, for me, it's some like concluding thoughts of, so
Yeah.
many women do not talk about this,
Mm.
and it's their choice.
Yeah.
It's totally their choice. But I found out when I opened up and shared my story, so many inbox, especially like on social media, I've gotten so many inbox messages from other moms saying, I lost my baby 20 years ago. One lady said, I lost my baby 30 years ago. Like, just people who I've known for a very long time who've never had the conversation, and just something that some women just choose not to talk about. But I'm grateful that they felt that safe space with me because I opened up and shared, and it gave them the voice to be able to talk and share. And even with my book, some of them have mentioned, how can I get you your book? And I told them, hey, it's on Amazon, you can go and get it. And it gave them, I think, I don't want to use the word closure because I don't want to say that, but uh, sometimes people need to put words or verbiage to sort of kind of things that they've been silent about for so long. And I think that was the blessing, I would say, that came about. What I would think of, I can imagine walking around and just holding something, that deep and heavy,
Mm.
and never ever ever really talking about it. Of course in your immediate circle, and sometimes people need that level of release. So I, even though it was hard for me, I was grateful to be in that process with some women who've shared that with me.
Well, and honestly, it's changed. Now it's talked about more, and now
Mm-hmm.
doctors are
Mm-hmm.
encouraged, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
hospitals know how to deal with it better. I believe that child loss is a little more. I don't want to say common, but it is kind
Mm-hmm.
of common if it's more than
Yeah.
before. And
Mm-hmm.
back then, 20, 30 years ago, they weren't allowed to see their baby. They weren't given any
Yeah.
pictures.
Yeah.
They weren't talked
Yes.
about. It was like, okay,
Yeah.
you're done, move on.
Move on. Yeah.
So I am grateful to be in
Mm-hmm.
this time period where
Mm-hmm.
we are encouraged more to process it and
Yes.
other people, but
Mm-hmm.
not everyone had that kind of experience.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
kind of unfortunate.
Yes. Yes.
So I guess in closing, what would you say to someone who's in our shoes, just dealing with, child loss and just wondering how they can go on?
Yes, I would definitely, because I'm honest, it does hurt. It's a very deep, deep pain. But what I can say and what I highly encourage is to pull from something that is greater than yourself, whom I believe is the Lord Jesus Christ.
Mhm.
I get really even teary-eyed thinking about it, that God just gives you that level of hope and that level of strength, that when you feel like that I don't have the strength, that God gives you the strength. I totally believe it. He gives you that level of supernatural strength. I just couldn't even imagine doing that on my own, and that a community of people who can pray for you, who really can pray on your behalf when sometimes you may not even feel like praying or even have the words to say, that you have that community of support. I think a community of support is so key. And so with the internet, they have, Facebook groups and things of that nature. So I would encourage somebody to tap into the resources that I believe that God has put in the earth for us to
Mhm.
help with our grief, and that you don't have to go through this alone, that there are countless number of women as myself and you in your ministry who will talk to you, who will pray with you. There have been so many women who've called me on the phone.
Mhm.
I was in a group with an infant loss group, and just to be able to text in a group where they had an understanding of what I was experiencing and going through. So I would say to find you some level of support,
Mhm.
to help you through this process, and to share what you're comfortable with talking. And definitely, if you don't feel comfortable, then have a journal to be able to get those feelings out. But I can definitely say that over time, the grief does not feel as heavy. And I know for a fact that God can hold you in the bosom of his heart to endure something like this. Like I know that for a fact, that
Yeah,
God holds each and every one of us when we go through that.
he sure does. Thank you for
Mhm,
sharing with us. If people
mhm,
want to connect with you or find you online,
mhm.
how can they do that, or even your book?
So my book is called The Journey, on Amazon. And it's Tarinna Olley. My last name is spelled Olley, and my first name is Tarinna. If you pull it up on Amazon, it's that and other books that I have. And
Mhm.
on social media, I have a heavy presence on social media, so I'm always there. So you can always send me a message on any social platform, or if you want to reach me via email, same name, TarinaOlley@gmail.com. I always reply to people back, and I would love to connect with some other person who may be experiencing this.
Oh, thank you so much for spending time with us and sharing your story, your Gabriel, and just everything that you've gone through, how God has seen you through this and continues to see
Mhm.
you through it. So I'm
And thank you so much for having me, and may God continue to grace you for the work that you do sowing into others, and may he take it wherever he takes it with you, and God bless you, and thank you.
thank you.
All right.
All right, so I'm just stop recording.